Marcus has $847 in his checking account on a quiet Tuesday morning in June. He knows the exact number because he checked it twice before getting out of bed. Not because he's obsessive. Because $847 sits exactly $153 short of a number that's been living in his head for 8 months, $1,000. $1,000 isn't enough to buy a car. It won't pay off his student loans. It won't change his life in any material way. But there's something about that number, something he can't quite explain, that makes him feel like he's drowning at $847 and would feel like he's swimming at $1,000. So he does something unusual. He skips lunch for a week. He cancels a streaming service. He sells some old books. And on June 23rd, his balance reads $1,012. Here's the part that makes no sense: nothing actually changed. He's not richer. His bills are the same. His income is the same. He's literally $165 away from where he was 2 weeks ago. But Marcus feels completely different. He sleeps better. He stops checking his account compulsively. When his check engine light comes on, he doesn't panic, he just books the appointment. Same guy, same life, $165 in additional savings, and his entire relationship with money just shifted. My name is Your Name, I run Money Sketcher, and this is the breakdown of why $1,000 in savings creates a psychological shift that researchers still can't fully explain, why that shift matters more than the money itself, and why understanding this might be the most important financial lesson you learn this year. If you've ever felt broke at $900 and secure at $1,100, or wondered why a tiny emergency fund changes everything when mathematically it barely changes anything, hit subscribe, because the psychology here is genuinely wild. Let me show you what the data says. In 2023, the Federal Reserve published a study that asked Americans a simple question: if you faced a $400 emergency expense right now, could you cover it? 40% said no. Not it would be tight. Not I'd have to move some things around. Just no. They couldn't cover it without borrowing money, selling something, or skipping another payment. Now here's the interesting part. The researchers dug deeper and found something unexpected. The people who had at least $1,000 in savings, even if they had significant debt, even if they weren't high earners, reported dramatically lower financial stress, better sleep quality, and higher life satisfaction than people who had $500 or less. And this is where it gets weird: the difference between $500 and $1,000 in practical terms is almost nothing. It's not like $1,000 covers a catastrophic emergency. A real medical crisis, a car transmission, a job loss, those things cost way more than $1,000. But psychologically, $1,000 isn't a number. It's a threshold. It's the point where your brain stops treating money as a daily survival mechanism and starts treating it as a buffer. And once you cross that threshold, everything changes. That's the thesis. Now, quick disclaimers because I know someone's already typing. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a psychologist. This isn't medical or financial advice. I'm showing you what the research says and what I've observed, and you can decide what to do with it. Also, $1,000 isn't magic. It's not going to solve poverty. It's not going to fix systemic issues. But if you've been stuck below that threshold and you're wondering why it feels so different than the numbers suggest it should, there's actual science behind it. Keep that in mind. Let's talk about what actually happens in your brain when you hit $1,000. The scarcity trap. There's a researcher at Princeton named Eldar Shofar who studies the psychology of scarcity. And he's found something fascinating. When your brain is in scarcity mode, when you're living paycheck to paycheck with no buffer, it doesn't just make you stressed. It literally changes how you think. Scarcity creates what he calls tunneling. Your brain becomes hyper-focused on immediate threats and immediate needs. You can't think long-term because you're constantly firefighting short-term crises. You miss appointments. You forget to pay bills on time even though you know they're due. You make impulsive decisions because your bandwidth for good decisions is completely consumed by survival math. It's not that you're bad with money. It's that operating in scarcity mode uses up all your cognitive resources just staying afloat. And here's the key finding: that tunneling effect dramatically decreases once you have a small buffer. Even $1,000. Why? Because $1,000 covers most of the daily emergencies that trigger scarcity thinking. Flat tire, $200. Broken phone, $300. Urgent dental work, $400. Suddenly, these aren't existential crises. They're annoying, but manageable. Your brain stops burning energy on constant threat assessment and starts having space to think about literally anything else. The sleep connection. A 2022 study from the Financial Health Network tracked people's sleep patterns against their savings levels. People with less than $500 in savings lost an average of 3.2 hours of sleep per week to financial stress. They'd wake up at 3 a.m. doing mental math about bills. They'd lie awake calculating whether they could afford gas and groceries. People with $1,000 to $2,000 in savings? That number dropped to less than 1 hour per week. Same jobs. Similar debt levels. But one group sleeps and the other doesn't, separated by about $750. And here's why that matters: sleep deprivation destroys your ability to make good decisions, resist impulses, and regulate emotions. Which means financial stress creates sleep loss, which creates worse financial decisions, which creates more stress. It's a doom loop. $1,000 doesn't break the loop because it's huge. It breaks it because it's enough to let you sleep. The control shift. Here's the wildest part, and this comes from research by behavioral economists at Yale. They found that people with no emergency savings feel like money controls them. They use language like "money is happening to me and I can't afford to think about the future." People with even a small emergency fund, as little as $1,000, flip the script. They start using language like "I'm managing my money and I'm building toward something." Same economic class. Same income. But one group feels powerless and the other feels agency. An agency, the feeling that you have some control over your financial life, is one of the strongest predictors of financial success. Not because it magically makes you richer, but because it changes your behavior. When you feel powerless, you make short-term survival decisions. When you feel agency, you make long-term building decisions. $1,000 doesn't give you real power. But it gives you the feeling of power. And that feeling changes everything. Okay, so you hit $1,000. What actually happens next? This is where the research gets really interesting, because the effects cascade in ways you wouldn't predict. Cascade 1, you start saying no. Researchers at the University of Wisconsin tracked spending behavior before and after people built their first $1,000 emergency fund. Before, people said yes to almost everything. Friend's birthday dinner they couldn't afford? Yes, because saying no feels bad and they're broke anyway. What's another $60? After, people started saying no. Not to everything. But to things that didn't align with their priorities. Why? Because once you have a buffer, you start protecting it. The $1,000 gives you something to defend, which means you suddenly have a reason to draw boundaries. Before the buffer, every decision was made in crisis mode. After, you have the mental space to ask, do I actually want this? Cascade 2, you start planning. A 2021 study from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that people with no emergency savings rarely engaged in any financial planning. Not because they didn't want to, but because planning felt pointless when you're always in reaction mode. But once people crossed the $1,000 threshold, 68% of them started doing some form of planning within 3 months. Setting goals. Tracking expenses. Thinking about next year. $1,000 didn't give them enough money to execute big plans. It gave them enough stability to believe planning was worth the effort. Cascade 3, you stop making expensive desperation choices. This one's backed by data from the Pew Charitable Trusts. People without emergency savings are dramatically more likely to use payday loans, overdraft their accounts, put emergencies on high-interest credit cards, and borrow from friends and family. Not because they're irresponsible. Because when your car breaks down and you have $200 in the bank and the repair is $600, you don't have good options. You have expensive options and more expensive options. people with $1,000 plus in savings still face the same emergencies. But they have the option to pay cash or use a credit card they can pay off next month instead of spiraling into predatory lending. The emergency costs the same, but the long-term damage is way less. Over a year, that difference compounds into hundreds or thousands of dollars in avoided fees and interest. Cascade for your relationships improve. This one surprised me, but it's well documented. Financial stress is the leading cause of relationship conflict in the US. And the University of Kansas found that couples who had at least $1,000 in emergency savings reported significantly fewer money-related arguments than couples with less. Not because $1,000 solves relationship problems, but because when you're not in constant financial crisis, money stops being a daily source of tension. You're not fighting about overdraft fees. You're not blaming each other for unexpected expenses. You have space to actually talk about money instead of just panicking about it. Here's the question everyone asks: why $1,000? Why not $500 or $2,000? The answer is partly psychological, partly practical. Psychologically, $1,000 is the first adult round number most people encounter. It feels significant in a way $500 doesn't. It's a milestone. Your brain treats it differently. There's also something called round number bias in behavioral economics. Humans attach disproportionate meaning to round numbers. $1,000 feels like an achievement. $987 feels like you're still grinding. Is that rational? No. Does your brain care? Also no. Practically, most common emergencies fall below $1,000. Car repair, minor medical bill, appliance replacement, urgent vet visit. $1,000 covers 70 to 80% of the financial surprises most people face in a given year. It's not comprehensive coverage, but it's enough to handle most of what life throws at you without spiraling. Culturally, $1,000 has become the default recommendation from financial advisors, apps, and programs. So it's the number people aim for, which means it's the number that carries psychological weight. The Federal Reserve's $400 emergency question gets all the headlines. But internally, financial health researchers use $1,000 as the threshold for minimal financial stability. It's the line between struggling and getting by. Okay, let's talk to Marcus. Let's talk to everyone sitting at $400 or $700 or $850 wondering if this actually matters. Here's what I need you to understand. Getting to $1,000 isn't about the money. It's about proving to yourself that you can. Every behavioral study on financial stability says the same thing: the first savings milestone is the hardest and the most important. Not because $1,000 is a lot of money, but because getting there requires you to fundamentally change your relationship with money. You have to delay gratification, not buying something now to have security later, make trade-offs, choosing savings over spending, maintain consistency, building it over time instead of giving up, protect what you've built, not raiding it for non-emergencies. Those are the same skills you need to build $10,000 or $100,000. You're not practicing on $1,000. You're building the foundation of every financial success you'll ever have. And here's the permission I want to give you. It's okay if it takes a year. It's okay if it takes 2 years. The timeline doesn't matter. What matters is that you cross the threshold, because once you do, the psychological shift makes the next $1,000 way easier. People who save their first $1,000 save their second $1,000 in half the time. Not because they're making more money, because they've changed the pattern. You want to know what happened when I hit $1,000 for the first time? I was 24. I had $60,000 in student loan debt. I was making $38,000 a year. And I scraped together $1,000 over about 7 months. And I remember the exact moment I transferred that last $50 and saw my savings account read $1,003. I didn't feel rich. I felt possible. Like for the first time since graduating college, I wasn't just reacting to my life. I was building something. Did $1,000 change my material circumstances? Barely. I was still in debt. I was still living in a tiny apartment. I still couldn't afford most of the things I wanted. But I stopped waking up at 3 a.m. doing panic math. I stopped feeling nauseous every time I checked my bank account. I started believing I could actually get ahead instead of just surviving. And here's what I've seen coaching other people through this. The ones who hit $1,000 and then stop. It doesn't stick. They raid it, they drift back down, and they're back to zero within months. The ones who hit $1,000 and protect it like it's $100,000. They're at $5,000 within a year. Not because they got raises. Because the psychology shifted and the behavior followed. $1,000 is the test. The people who pass it unlock something in themselves that has nothing to do with the dollar amount. Here's the framework that actually works, based on what behavioral researchers recommend. Step 1. Pick a number and make it visible. $1,000, $500, whatever feels achievable. But pick one number and make it your only focus. Put it on a sticky note. Track it in an app. Make it impossible to ignore. Visibility creates accountability. Step 2. Automate the smallest amount you can sustain. Not the amount you wish you could save. The amount you can save every single week without breaking. $20 per week gets you to $1,000 in a year. $40 per week gets you there in 6 months. Consistency beats intensity. Every time. Step 3. Separate it physically. Different bank. Different account. Somewhere you can't access with your debit card. If it's easy to raid, you'll raid it. Make it just inconvenient enough that you have to really think before touching it. Step 4. Define what counts as an emergency. Before you start, write down 3 things that qualify as emergencies. Car repair. Medical bill. Job loss. Everything else is not an emergency. That vacation you want? Not an emergency. That concert? Not an emergency. Boundaries protect the fund. Step 5. Celebrate crossing $1,000, then forget it exists. When you hit the goal, acknowledge it. Take yourself to dinner. Tell someone who cares. Then immediately start building $2,000 and pretend the first $1,000 doesn't exist. It's no longer savings. It's your new floor. That's the framework. It's not complicated. It's just hard because it requires sustained behavior change. Look, I can't make you save $1,000. I can't make it easier or faster than it actually is. But I can tell you this, if you're stuck in the scarcity loop, if you're constantly reacting to money instead of managing it, if you're losing sleep over $300 emergencies, getting to $1,000 will change something fundamental. Not because the money is magic. Because the process of getting there changes you. You'll prove to yourself that you can delay gratification, make trade-offs, and build something over time. Those are the skills that actually matter. The $1,000 is just evidence that you have them. So here's what I want you to do. If you're under $1,000 in savings right now, pick a weekly number. Not an aspirational number. A real one. $10. $25. $50. Whatever you can actually sustain. Set up the automatic transfer. Separate the account. Define the emergencies. And then just don't stop. It'll feel slow. It'll feel pointless some weeks. But trust the psychology. Trust the research. Trust the thousands of people who've crossed this threshold and said everything felt different after. If this helped you understand why this number matters so much, do me a favor and subscribe to Money Sketcher. I break down the behavioral science of money so you can make smarter decisions based on how humans actually work, not how we wish we worked. And if you want a free savings tracker and emergency fund calculator, I'll link it in the description. No upsell. Just a tool to help you build this. Because the world is full of people telling you to invest in crypto or buy stocks or get rich quick. But almost nobody's talking about the unglamorous, boring, life-changing power of $1,000 in a savings account. I'll see you in the next breakdown. And Marcus? He's at $2,400 now. Same job. Same debt. But he sleeps through the night, and that alone was worth every skipped lunch. Sometimes the most powerful financial move you can make is the one that finally lets you stop panicking.